I love listening to it.
Kane Sims.
Kane Sims.
Kane Sims, the one and only Britain's finest, Mr. Kane Sims. Dustin Coates.
I like it when you guys are together and talking about voice.
Without further ado,
Welcome to the show.
All right. Ready to rumble. How are we doing today?
Great.
Fine too. Thank you.
Good. Welcome to VOX World, Marie and Ray. For those of you regular listeners out there, you'll notice that we are absent of Dustin, unfortunately. Another scheduling mishap on my side. But we are here and we're doing this. I'm just going to put this link into LinkedIn so that we can kick off that event there. Welcome Marie and Ray of VUI Agency. Excited to have you along. I've come across VUI Agency quite a while ago actually. So I know you've been doing it for quite a while, building voice experiences and whatnot in Germany and beyond. So do you want to tell us, for those that don't know, a little bit about VUI Agency and about yourselves? Marie, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I'm at VUI Agency since 2018 actually. And I think they were just founded some months before that. So like we are now 4 years old. And yeah, we are an agency building voice assistants, meaning voice applications. And also like our main purpose is creating custom assistants where we can put all our knowledge and effort in. And we are based in Germany, so with different offices in Berlin, Cologne, Bonn, and Munich, and also now in Switzerland as well. And growing more and more with more nice people.
Nice. Munich is epic. That was one of the final places I went before this whole stuff started happening. And it was an absolutely lovely place. So yeah, and you are a VUI architect at VUI Agency. What does that entail?
Exactly. Well, first of all, it's also VUI design what I'm taking care of, but also it's about knowing and overlooking the whole architecture and infrastructure of the voice application I'm working on, so that I can really see and know all constraints it might have and all features it has to integrate that in my design. This is what the architect is about.
Cool. And welcome, Ray. Welcome to VOX World. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself as well and about what your role is over at VUI Agency?
Sure, my pleasure. Well, hi. First of all, I'm Ray. I'm an innovation manager and conversational designer at VUI. I'm usually trying to see where somebody is going or where something is going and what's the best use case for all the users involved and for everyone who's going to use it. So my main purpose most of the time is to find the best conversation possible in any way and use case, and also help our architects to drive the whole technology behind it and find new spots and new things that we could maybe innovate or develop or even go beyond what we know at the moment.
Cool. Nice. So you mentioned there that the VUI Agency is working a lot on kind of like custom assistance. So explain a little bit about what's happening over there. Are you still working with Alexa and Google Assistant and things like that, or is everything focused now on custom assistants?
Well, we have both. We are working on platforms. We're working with Google and Alexa, of course, but we also have clients where we really have to implement everything from the get-go, from the first use case, the exploration, up to how to set up the ASR, the NLU, all of it. That's why our main focus is often at the linguist side. That's why we have so many linguists or so many people in our agency with a linguistic background, and they're doing an awesome job of knowing how language really works, which I so adore.
Nice. It's interesting. It's I remember probably about 3 years ago or so, there was kind of a lot of different. I mean, I would say conversation designers were coming from a lot of different backgrounds, and playwriting was one of them. Screenwriting, things like that. But it's interesting how many linguists have kind of got into conversation design over the last few years. I think 3 years ago, I hadn't really heard of a linguist. The only term, the reason why I'd heard of the word linguist was I used to listen to hip hop music. I still do, but more so back in the day. And I don't know if there's any hip hop fans out there, but you may be familiar with Cunning Linguists, an American hip hop kind of group. And so that kind of was my first introduction to the term linguist, which I like the word. It sounds nice. So you're full of linguists over there.
Yes, we are from many different disciplines actually, because like in some point you are focusing on a discipline. Like for my part, it's mostly about phonetics. I started with my studies in like basic linguistics, but then I focused on analyzing speeches from people, and also looking what kind of TTS and synthetic voices are they, and how do they function. And then we have other linguists which have more knowledge about like corpus linguistics, for example, and there are so many like fields, and it's nice to have like experts in it, and then we all exchange together, and then we combine this strength and create our custom assistants.
I mean, it's easy to have linguists in there. I mean, conversational design, on one hand, you can do it on almost every platform. You can go to Google, you can go to Dialogflow, VoiceFlow, whatever there is, and you get most of the things done, like the NLU and stuff. But it comes from the beginning to the end. It starts with, how do I understand the voice? And how do I transcribe it to how do I understand actually the words and the intent in it? And then also, how do I get the conversation running? And then what comes after that? So the linguist part is from top to bottom. And if you want to do your own assistance, if you want to do custom build assistance, you shouldn't do that without a linguist, I think.
It's interesting. You were talking there about the phonetics and stuff like that. And as advanced as text to speech is, and we had this conversation with John Kelvey and Brett Kinsella and Ahmed Bouzid a few weeks back, where we were debating whether voice is stuck and what the landscape is and stuff like that. And Brett kind of put things into real perspective, which was that if you think about what we've actually got in front of us, we're able to have dialogues with machines that can understand us and speak back to us, at a relative degree of fidelity. It's an amazing spot that we're in when you think about it like that. And as kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Some text to speech systems, I mean, as far you can understand them, they sound great. The WaveNet sounds cool. Custom voices like the BBC sounds pretty good. But what people don't really understand is that really to make them sound proper, natural, and not robotic, and not kind of boring and making you switch off halfway through, it does require a little bit of attention. It requires shaping and molding. And is that where you see linguists really helping out as far as the SSML markup and making things sound more human?
Definitely. Maybe also for the beginning, by choosing the voice, actually, it's also nice to have to know about the phonetics of a voice and of the parameters a voice can be formed by, and so that you can really help explaining why a certain voice sounds good or might not be the right fit for maybe your brand custom assistant. But also, as you said, for the SSML tuning and so on, it's really good to have an ear for it, and to know what pauses can actually do, like in terms of emphasis and all these different mechanics actually, which are in a voice and in the voice parameters.
Interesting.
SSML, I mean, that's the end part of it.
Yeah.
And you can do so many mistakes and so many wrong things at the beginning when you start developing the TTS and start thinking about how should this TTS sound, and where's the difference if I record an O or an O, and how will that change the whole model, and that's another part you just can't do without them. And if that goes wrong, the best SSML are going to help you to fine tune it and to have a charismatic voice in the end.
You can go one step, I suppose, before that as well, and making sure that you've actually you've got the right words in the first place in the right order.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. So we'll get into talking about charismatic voice assistants. We've got a question from Adam. I'll come to that in a moment. But while we're on the concept of voices and TTS and all that kind of stuff, I've seen that you announced a partnership with Vocal ID relatively recently. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about what that entails?
We were thinking about how could we maybe like we would try to fit our persona design that we create also on linguistic character traits and so on, that we would actually like in most of the cases to also have a voice which actually fits to that. So I think it's good to also partner up or to communicate at least with the TTS providers right at the start, so that you don't come into a project and you have already a selected voice, and then you do the persona design and the dialogue design. So I think it's smart to start at the beginning and work there together.
Yeah, the way they're working at the moment is usually you have two models, and one is very general, like it says everything perfectly and it has perfect pronunciations and has all the words, so it can sound nice, but most of the times it's very without a character, without charisma, without everything, because it's not recorded that way. And afterwards you put on top the voice, like how should it sound, and sounding is not the same as emotions and things like that. And we thought, and we still believe in that, if you start that at the beginning, and you should start that at the beginning to have a real charismatic voice. And that's why we got in contact with them and then started thinking about how could we develop the first grade ML model for this voice before even going into how does the voice sound. So we want to give it emotions first and then the sound of the voice.
Interesting. What are you finding from the work that you're kind of doing? We'll get into the. I suppose it's related to charisma. It is related to charisma, but it's more broader than that. I don't know if you would agree, but I would put charisma as kind of like a personality trait. Could be one of many kind of traits, if you like. But the concept of having a persona, an overarching persona, and a brand voice is something that some companies have. We talk about it quite a lot, but there doesn't seem to be a tremendous load of examples of things like custom brand voices in the conversational AI space, although it's getting there. But what are you seeing from the work that you're doing with the clients that you're doing? What's the appetite for those custom voices and custom personas and things like that? Is that like a mandated thing that you always do, or is it something that you kind of need to spend a bit more time selling in and all that kind of stuff?
Well, they're getting it quite fast, as a matter of fact, because once you explain to them that this is the person speaking to your customers in the end with your words. So the persona design is not only the part for the voicing or the sound or the emotion of a voice, it's also the words. It's your conversational partner. So to have a conversation, you need two people, you need two persons, and both of them have their own user story. And if you just go for a use case and I want to fulfill your use case, then it's a very one-sided conversation, and nobody really likes that. Even if I'm not interested in a conversation and I talk to you and you come on and you bubble and you keep on talking, I will have I will have my own user story already. I will have in my head, I don't want to have this conversation, and that's how I speak. That's how I phrase my sentences and my replies to you. And persona design is more than just how does the voice sound. It's how does it speak? How do I react? What do I want? Do I want to try and sell something as well, or try to make that person more comfortable in the situation, or maybe educate that person on something else that I could also do in my brand, like telling you how to screw in a screw somewhere because you just went to IKEA and bought a new bed. It's so much more than just the voice.
Cool.
And
Go on, Marie.
and also there's also again the part of linguistics and combining all the strengths, because to have like a persona with charisma also means to have a kind of a consistency within all the traits a persona can have. And if we know about all the disciplines which will be involved in creating this custom assistant with a custom persona, then we can create this consistency, because we talk to each other and see what are the different aspects there and make sure that they fit together.
A wrong persona can take all the trust of a brand away. I mean, IKEA is my most favorite example at the moment. I mean, they don't offer a lot with their assistant. But maybe that's just my feeling. But as soon as I talk to that assistant, I know it's IKEA, and I know I can trust it. I know this person, this TTS knows everything about IKEA. Even if it doesn't, that's what I believe, just because of the way the words are phrased, and that it's a consistent character that I totally see within the commercials, inside the shopping place, and in the catalog, and everywhere. Wherever I see IKEA, I know it is IKEA, because it talks to you in a specific way. And if that's not in that voice interface, then I feel disconnected. It feels untrustworthy. So I wouldn't really want to do my banking with it, maybe, if it's about a bank, or it's just not what it's supposed to be then.
Yeah, it might also help potentially with, like, when an interaction goes poorly. I always remember. I don't know whether Domino's have released a skill or an action in Germany, but the one that existed in the UK, I haven't actually used it for a while, to be honest, but I remember using it a while back. This is years ago, and it didn't really let you do anything. You had to already have all of the things that you wanted to order saved in your favorites basket on the website. So then you just went to Alexa and then you could just order whatever was in your favorite basket. But if you're like me, your order changes every time. You're in the mood for something else. So you just couldn't really use it. But the fact is that it had a really strong persona. The brand had a really strong persona. And you know, if you said something and it didn't really kind of understand you, like the fallbacks would say stuff like, I don't know, like if you were saying, yes, I want to order for delivery on it, whatever, it would say jalapeno, hell yes, or something like that, or like, you know, pepperoni, pretty please, or whatever. You know, it had like little things in like that. And even though basically the thing was all but useless because I couldn't really use it, I didn't walk away from it feeling bad. I thought it's quite cheeky, it's quite cool, you know.
Mm-hmm. There was a pizza assistant once, one of the first use cases for Google Assistant, and it had exactly the same. It had so many things that you just couldn't do, but it was fun talking to it. And then in the end, some of those people even ordered pizzas which they never ever wanted. I mean, they wanted salami, and in the end, they just had a simple cheese pizza, just because it was fun talking to it. And that's what the persona is all about. It can make you do things that you don't want to do, probably.
Yeah, that reminds me of Poncho, like as it's a chatbot example, but this little weather bot looked like a cat, and like it's just the weather, which is the use case, but it's common. So yeah, also like very funny words on that.
Yeah, nice. So would you class the persona as the charisma? So how would you define a charismatic voice assistant? Is it the persona that's charismatic? Is it a layer underneath it? Like, how would you actually define what a charismatic voice assistant is?
It's all of it, and I think none of it while you do it. I mean, if you talk to a charismatic person, I don't believe that you feel it in that moment. But once the conversation is over and you can't stop thinking about that conversation, and you still hear that voice, and you still think about the way that person phrased things, and all that stuff, everything that's still there after the conversation, even a week after or 2 weeks after, and then you start thinking about, oh, maybe next week I'm going to talk to that person again, and you feel excited just because you can talk to that person again, even though you maybe just talk about the weather, but you want to talk to that person, and that's charismatic. That's charisma, and that's based on the persona. That's based on how the persona fits the voice. I mean, if I would be talking like this all the time now, and I would, you probably would love to hear what I have to say, but not my voice. So it doesn't make it charismatic. So it's all of it combined, and then the brand into it too, and maybe a commercial that you've seen about the brand, that it's just everything. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's also connected to attractiveness, because like in the end, yeah, it's for the user, and the user should be attracted by it. So you design for the user. So you would like also for the persona think of who am I talking to, and then design on that base also the persona. So because it likes to be liked by the users in the end. And what I also want to add from a phonetic point of view, because I found it very interesting that there's some university professor which is working on finding the direct traits in the voice which really convey charisma. So he did like a score with it, and can tell you that you maybe should lower your voice a bit for your speed, so everything fits together, so you sound a bit more charismatic in the end. So yeah, this is also again like one aspect of the many, as Ray says.
Interesting. I'd be reluctant to put VOX World through that assessment, just in case what comes back says that our hosting is less than charismatic. But no, I think that. So I put a video on earlier on LinkedIn when I was talking about this event, and the definition I found was compelling attractiveness or charm that can inspire devotion in others. I always think when I hear the word charisma, I always think of like, I don't know, like it always makes me think of like pop stars or something like that. Do you know what I mean? That have like big egos and kind of like loud, brash personalities and stuff. But really, it's a lot. It can be a lot softer than that. Something that's just compelling or attractive that can inspire devotion. You know, a relationship, some kind of synergy with others, is quite a nice definition of it, I think.
But I have a but. I mean, it's a superstar. It may be a superstar. Imagine Britney Spears doing the news to you, like as a news anchor. Her charisma on stage would be gone because it's a whole different setting. It wouldn't fit. So it's more than just that one thing. It's about everything. It's about who are you talking to, where you set it, what do you want to do, what do you want to get, what does the user want to do, what does the user want to get, and how's the voice playing in all of that. I mean, if I would try and persuade you into something, then I maybe would talk like this, and I would be charismatic in that situation. But in the next moment, we will talk about the car that is going down there, and you get all emotional, and you want to go like much faster, and you want to bring your emotions out, and that might be charismatic too, but it's still the same person. So just one aspect of a charismatic voice wouldn't be enough. It's just everything. I think I will always come back to that.
Interesting. And Shakib's got a question as well. I will get to these questions in a moment, because I can see them fitting in a moment's time once we've got through this next question, which is, how do you approach that then? Because that could be, it all sounds very nice. How do you distill that down into something you can work with, and how do you approach actually creating a charismatic persona?
Well, it's a long process, kind of, but I would call it a standard process for persona design. I mean, you're looking at who's the brand, what is their values, which is very important. What do they stand for? What are their goals as well while interacting with the user? But what are the goals that they might not want to tell the user? And then you look at the user. Who are we talking to actually? And then we're trying to find the best persona that has all of this, that has all of the brand values within, that has all of the brand communication guidelines within somehow, so it stays consistent with everything else that's happening around. You will give it their own use cases where you say, okay, if I have the chance, I would like to talk about something else too, because that's something that belongs to a person, that you have your own dreams and wishes, and so it also belongs to the persona. And then you will try to find the right words for the user persona. So we have to look at the user persona as well to see whom are we talking to, what are their wishes and pain points, and how can we help them get to their goal and achieve what they want to do. And that's the base for the conversational design afterwards.
And is there any anything specific that you kind of do or document when it comes to that persona? Is it the kind of typical persona that you may have seen? I'm sure when I say you may, I'm talking to the audience here, that they may have seen or used in the past in terms of a description of a person and personality traits and motivations, things like that. Is there anything else? I've seen a couple of different versions of personas. Is there anything specifically that you're trying to kind of get down here?
Ray, please add something. But yeah, in the first place, it is.
Sure.
But of course, we also want to add more aspects of it, not just basic character traits and everything. For example, even something which would recommend a certain type of voice. And also, in the end, we are working on style guides for the right use of the language for a certain persona. So, which is more than just be polite or something, that we really put it into words. How could you be polite, and how could you represent the competence, which is very important, for example, for service applications, that the user really trusts that it gets a competent answer, and so on. So it's we create bigger style guides actually, which we could work with and which we could also present to the clients.
Of course, we're having that ordinary, let me call it ordinary for now, even though don't mean negative, persona canvas that there is, so you know who you're talking to just by the traits, by the personality, by the characters, pain points, and gains, and all that stuff that all of us probably know. But we also added for our canvas some physical traits, like what kind of frequency and how much SPS there should be in a second, because that all defines somehow what a voice persona in the end could be. Plus added phrasings like what would I say and how would I say it, and how would I not say it, of course, as well. And those are things that extend our persona canvas totally.
Interesting. We've got a question from Shakib Labidi here. Shout out to Shakib. And Shakib runs UX Playground, which I'll be speaking at UX Playground next week or the week after. So yeah, feel free to join us at that meetup. It's going to be good. We're going to be talking conversation design principles. But Shakib's asking, I wonder if diversity, ethnic background, dialects, and things like that is something you consider for your voice assistants. Now, it's not clear whether Shakib is talking about when you create your persona, or whether he's talking about kind of creating and designing for different dialects, different accents, things like that. So maybe we'll take it in both ways. Tell us a little bit about how you treat this from the customer perspective, and also whether this has any influence or impact on the personas that you create.
Well, we're having within our agency, I would say we're quite diverse from all over the countries, from Germany, from Spain, from some are even not even working in Germany. So we are quite diverse already, and that's why it's important for us to be diverse and to have that to everyone, even with our clients and customers. And we're trying to put that into the persona always, really keeping them somehow neutral at the beginning. So we're not forcing something extraordinary to make somebody more diverse, because it doesn't always fit the use case, unfortunately. And even though sometimes if you look at the user, we go on conversational first, so it's always a hard thing to put all of these things in there which you would want to have from a diverse perspective. But ethnics and dialects and these things, that's why we basically are doing assistants or custom assistants. You can't provide them on platforms like Google or anywhere else, which are very strict in what you can do with them. And most of the use cases and most of the brands, but also their users, they want to feel understood. They want to feel close to who they talk to. They want to feel picked up. I don't know how to say that, but they want to feel safe. So from that perspective already, we go into ethnics, we go into dialects, and also in diversity, and we're not going for cliches. That's something that we're trying to avoid always, even with our clients. And we consult them in that parts too, and say like, hey, I know you maybe first think it should be female because it's an assistant, but we don't believe so. We don't even believe it should be male. Maybe it should be something in between. Maybe it should be something non-distinguishable. Let's wait and see what is the best for the use case, and that's what we're coming for. We're always trying to find the best solution for the single use case.
It's interesting, isn't it? It's interesting, the concept of gender in particular is an interesting one, because I remember, and I always reference Wired for Speech. I'm sure you've read by Clifford Nass, who says that there is, regardless of kind of the voice, people will assign a gender to it just naturally. Human psychology will hear something and assign a gender to it. I don't know if you heard that Meet Q voice. That was the closest thing I've ever heard to something that you can't quite place. But still, when we did an episode, I think it was the Rundown, we did it and we played some samples, and everyone was erring on one side or the other. Sounds a little bit more male to me, sounds a little bit more female to me. So how do you, so when we've done personas in the past, we don't give the persona a gender, but the challenge is that you need a voice for it. It has to be voiced. And so how do you tackle that issue? Because on the one hand, it's a challenge, isn't it? Because depending on the use case, it's always a challenge. You don't want to make the wrong decision. You don't want to kind of offend anyone. Obviously, you can give the choice, as Google do with their kind of broad assistant, but not every organization with a custom assistant is in a position to do that necessarily. So how do you approach the gender of your personas that you create?
This is also where phonetics helps a bit to get out of this dilemma, because certain like pitches have convey certain character traits even, and so that we could give more recommendation in which frequency or which range of frequency your persona should talk. And most of the time there are male voices or voices which were recorded by male speakers and female speakers which have this range and overlap. So if you are in this range, you can actually say, okay, it doesn't matter if it's female or male, not in terms of the persona, but then there are also other parameters you have to consider, like for the whole picture. And then one of the voices might fit better if you have like just a portfolio of voices you can choose from. If you design a custom voice yourself, this is getting more interesting then. But then you can also try to have something like Q, but also which is also in Wired for Speech. This can be a tricky part, because some people might be a bit like irritated if they can not say it's male or female. So this is also a brand decision. I mean, there might be brands which really want to achieve that.
We mostly, I mean, the canvas that we're using now is very helpful in that because we see it from a data perspective that was done by linguists, and if we are searching for the closest of frequencies of the ones that we think is the best fitting for this use case, then we're very gender free. Because it might be that there is a female speaker that we found that has such a nice low voice and the perfect pitch and the perfect SPS, and all the data is just like so close. Then we would recommend that person, no matter if it's a low voice or a high pitched voice, and it's just based on that data. What is the best for this use case that we found? And on custom voices, you totally have the possibility to do so. In the end, it's always up to the client to say yes, no, I don't want that. I want a male voice or I want a female voice. But that's something that we unfortunately cannot decide. We can just tell them, well, look, here's the data. This might be a better fit because it's closer to what we think is the best.
Yeah, interesting. You've mentioned voice acting a few times and finding talent and stuff like that. Do you tend to use the voice talent to create the synthesized voice, or do you tend to use voice talent to record the audio and use the audio, or does it depend?
Depends.
Depends. Yeah.
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 On what?
I mean, like for one example would be like for more like a skill for children where there are like longer stories read. I would definitely recommend like a voice which can actually convey all the emotions and so on. And this is still a bit hard with synthetic voices.
Also, sometimes it doesn't really make no sense to really create a full voice if there's only 200 prompts that you got in the whole skill, and you don't need any more, and there's no future other than what is happening right now for the skill. Well, why would you go to a TTS if you can have this really recorded in a way that is perfect for the use case?
Interesting. So Adam Campbell has a question. From a conversational design perspective, how are you leveraging customer experience and the underlying process driving those experiences to design conversations? I think what he's getting at is, does the way that you approach this differ depending on the type of customer experience and the process, the customer journey that you're catering for, or the needs that you're catering for?
Well, I don't need a conversation that in the end doesn't bring me anything that I didn't want. I mean, nobody would start a conversation if you already know that this is not going to a good end. And so it's totally necessary to look on what do their customers or their users really want in the conversation. So every now and then clients come up with, hey, we have this use case already, and it's maybe an old IVR system or a chatbot pre-based, and it doesn't really work. People don't like using it. And then you will have to look at it first, like, what do the users really want? Why don't they use it? And that will lead you to the use case your user wants. And that's what you have to design for. And that makes it really easy, because once you know what your user want, the conversation is very clear, because you know what they want and you know what you want. And then you come together, have a talk, and in the end, everyone is happy. And that's how, for me at least, I go at the beginning for conversational design. Let's see, what do they want? What do I want to say? And how would this talk happen? And I think it's quite straightforward and simple somehow. But I might be wrong, like totally. It feels simple to me.
Yeah. Cool. So when it comes to creating the persona, the charisma, like, how are you? Well, there's two questions. One is, how do you kind of write charismatically, if that's a word? How do you make sure that you're kind of infusing this charisma into the dialogue? And then the second is, how do you determine whether what you want to happen happens and measure the impact of it? So maybe we'll start with the first question in terms of, how do you, once you've got this outline, you've got this persona, you understand the kind of the way in which you're going to kind of go about this, the tone that the conversation might have. How do you then ensure that through the creation of the dialogue and things like that, and the TTS and stuff like that, what kind of things do you consider to make sure that what you produce is in line with what you have kind of decided, if that makes sense?
There's so much to consider. I mean, you see it like on a very as we would say intuitively, on a lexical level. So of course the word choice you make conveys a certain persona and a certain meaning, and also what kind of character the persona has, and but also on like basic sentence structure you can convey more charisma if you're not talking like in these longer sentences with a lot of commas and everything. Then this can also convey charisma, and well, there's so many aspects.
It's how you try to get the whole experience together, right? It's I mean, as you said, with the pizza guy, just imagine that the pizza guy would have, let's say, a Swedish accent and would talk very slow and is every now and then skipping words, and it would feel wrong. It just would feel wrong because you think of pizza and you have I don't know, Mario in your head, like Mario Bros, and he's speaking like this, and that's why you go in and we got a pizza. You want a pizza, right? You want a pizza. Come, tell me, what pizza do you like? And that's something that you just need there. And
I'm starting to feel like a pizza.
Yeah, that's charismatic then. I mean, if that's something a voice can bring to you that you didn't even think about pizza, but now you do, then it's the right voice. And even if it says grammatically wrong sentences which don't make no sense, like just the sentence itself, but in the conversation do, then it's totally perfect. So it's so much in there. It's where do you start? It's more like where would you stop? Because you could go on and fine tune the voice in the end and make it a little more high pitched, because that Mario is more like this, and you want to push it a little more up there. Yes, this is good. And these are all the things that come in there. You need them. So there is no ending. You could always fine tune it a little more from the persona, from the words, from the phrasings, from the pitch, from the TTS tuning. It all has to come together somehow.
How do you approach that kind of iteration? Because you're right, you could be there forever, and one thing is, you write a line of dialogue, it never sounds as you intend it to sound when a TTS engine brings it back. And so then you need to clean it up. And then you put it in context with something coming before it and something coming after it. And it's like, that doesn't actually sound right now. So let's rewrite that line. And then it comes back sounding terrible. So then you tweak it again. So you could, dialogue changes all the time. It gets rewritten, it gets redone. And SSML takes kind of like, some tweaking and stuff like that. How do you manage that kind of iterative process? And how do you know when you're done?
What you just said feels so like scripting to me. I mean, you can't script a dialogue. You can only have it as often as possible and find out how to kind of steer that dialogue into the direction that fits to the persona and the use cases involved in this conversation. So for me, it's not writing. It's like I have my golden line. I know where I start, because I know where the user comes from, and I know in this case where the user is going to end. And everything in between is something that I love to talk out and speak out with my colleagues, and we go through all the possibilities. And then you will start to see a silver lining, and you will start to see the golden way through that conversation. And come in the linguists at play, they go like, hey, if they say it this way, it could also steer that conversation into that way. So how do we get out of there again? And it's not really scripting. I see it as a living object that you really have to live for a while to see how this thing works, what's all involved, and in which directions does it want to go, and which directions do you allow it to go as well. Of course, there's in a conversation you can also say, you know what, I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking to you about that. I'm here for selling you pizzas, but nothing else. I don't have drinks. I don't have noodles. I don't have Chinese. Pizza only. So, what kind of topping do you want?
What's your thoughts, Marie? What's your kind of approach to that iterative
Yeah.
cycle of testing and hearing something and tweaking it and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I have the feeling if I work with one TTS for a longer time, I already know a bit like what works and what doesn't. So it really some kind of influences, yeah, how I would write. Of course, then I have to meet with the actual, yeah, what we would like to say in the end, and I shouldn't, yeah, just because of the sake of the voice, I shouldn't get far away from the persona. But there's some consolidation in the end, and of course I try it out. Then I listen to it and maybe choose some different words if they are they fit. And so it's like somehow like I don't know, like programming something and putting something together and try something out again, and in the end it's it's a round thing.
I used to see the voice, like the sound of the voice in the end, it's like makeup. It's if the conversation isn't close enough to the persona and everything that both of them want to achieve in that conversation, then the coolest and best tuned voice, the best tuned voice can.
I think you can get away with that. Tunedest, the most tunedest voice. Yeah.
Voice, it will not save the conversation. It's like it's not going to make it any better because this conversation sucked already. It's not going to be better just because it's a charismatic voicing sound voice. So yeah, you basically start with the body and then you put the makeup on.
It's interesting. I don't know what you think, but I don't know if it's just the way my kind of brain works. But you know how graphic designers are very kind of anal about things, rightly so, because our brains process patterns and pictures, and if something's not quite right, it's like that doesn't look quite right. So graphic designers tend to be very like pixel perfect, you know what I mean, unless it's done artistically, of course. So they tend to want everything to be lined up and stuff like that. And I don't know if it's just me, but I tend to be a little bit like that with dialogue. So whenever I test anything, I've got my eyes closed. I'll never test it with a screen. I always have my eyes closed. I'll always listen to it, and I'll just think to myself, you know, what is this sounding like? And then that kind of guides the sort of process of tweaking or whatever. And that's a little tip, actually, I would recommend to people if you're designing conversations. Test it with your eyes closed because it's a different experience. But anyway, so you get to a point where you're happy, sounds nice, but then it's not a one-person game. It's a team game, and it's not just a team game. It's also a client relation game, and it's also a client-customer relation game. And so there's this triangle of people involved in doing this kind of stuff. And everyone who's designed any conversation at any point in time has had either a client or something a challenge on the way something's phrased or something's said, and a suggestion that's been mandated that you might not agree with. How would you recommend for designers out there to approach that? Because you're putting blood, sweat, and tears into making things sound absolutely perfect, and others might not necessarily have the same opinion. How do you approach those conversations, even if it's just within your team, disagreements within your team about how something should sound? How do you approach those conversations?
It's I mean, if it comes to that situation, no matter if it's with the user or with the client or even in your team, for me, most of the time, from UX design perspective, it means the persona wasn't clear. You started the conversation and you started the whole development without a clear understanding for everyone involved, for all of the stakeholders, of the persona. because otherwise you wouldn't have that problem. You wouldn't come up with things like, hey, that voice sounds weird. It doesn't sound like the way we planned at the beginning. That only happens if you had no plan, if you just started out something without having the 360 view on what you're doing from each and every single perspective, from your clients, from your users, from your team, from everyone involved, and get all of their feelings and, of course, knowledge into that too, and that from the get-go, from the very beginning. So the persona is not lacking anything. And in this persona, you already have the use case. You decided on a use case, you committed on that use case, you decided on the persona, you decided on the user persona, like with the conversational partner, you decided on the context, where am I starting, where am I ending. That all should be decided before you even think about having a conversation. That's like in real life. You don't go nowhere to have a certain conversation without being prepared somehow, and without knowing a little about what's going to be talked about. And that's the same for every voice thing or every conversation thing that you try to design.
Yeah, I also think it's about good groundwork, that you have, that you have your style guide, that you can actually argument on that, what you wrote down and developed before, and you can show, okay, our voice assistant wouldn't say that because of this character trait, and this is manifested like in this kind of talking or voice or anything. And yeah, I think it's about that. And it's also, as when you mentioned graphical designers, we of course have the same problems, because like everyone, like many people can see, and many people can talk and listen, so they use it themselves, and trying to argument on their intuition, and of course that's very fine, and we need that in the beginning, but after that it's good to have good groundwork to explain why we would go with this dialogue design.
That's why we're always having a workshop at the beginning where everyone involved is coming together, and most of that, the reason for that being is really that everyone is aligned. That no matter if it's the communication person, in the marketing person, the CEO, somebody out of the customer support who really has contact to the real user in the end, like if you get all of that into the groundwork, into the beginning workshop, then you get all the perspectives, and then even the hardest CEO person who thinks they're always right, and who thinks that they have the budget, of course, and that they have to give it to you, you have to make them understand how conversation actually works, and you have to make them understand also how this company is in relationship with that user. And they most of the times have their own perspective of it. Of course, that's why they're the CEO, but they also know that because they don't have the perspective of a marketing person, that's why they have somebody doing that, and why they have somebody in the customer support. And that's why they don't have a clue on how is actually something happening on the phone while talking to a customer who's not satisfied with the product that was just sent to them. And if you do that, I think that's a recipe for success of the conversation in the end.
It's a technique I used to use in service design, which is always relying on data and evidence rather than opinions, because everyone's opinion is subjective. What sounds good to one person doesn't sound good to somebody else, in the same way as what one website that looks good to one person doesn't look good to somebody else. And so to avoid that kind of highest paid person's opinion scenario, whereby everyone kind of just does whatever the CEO says or whatever, the conversation that we used to have all the time, and it's similar in this situation, is that the opinion is valid and needed, but it is an opinion of one, and no individual in any project is the baseline for the general public and or the baseline for the user. And so it's like, let's take everything, let's put the concerns down, let's actually just go and test it. And if the concerns you raised are raised in testing, then we'll address them. But if they're not, then let's not worry about them. And I used to use the phrase, let's not argue about the color of a bike shed. As long as the bike shed can store bikes safely, it doesn't really matter what color it is. So that's good. But in that, we're kind of getting into, testing, proving out value, making sure that what you've created is in line with what you expect and what you would expect the customer to expect of it. How do you approach that, taking a creation and making sure that it's a little bit like the brand image versus personality kind of, diamond, if you've seen that before, whereby a brand has an image that they want to portray, and they do everything they can to portray that image with a logo and colors and all that kind of stuff, but they're not in control of what the customer perceives. So the customer perceives the brand personality, and the aim of the brand who tries to convey the image is to convey a consistent enough image so that enough people have a similar perception of the personality, which is a very similar situation that we're in here, is that you create something, you intend it to have a certain effect, you intend it to have a certain persona, and the aim is that you do it in such a way that you are able to, with a large enough sample, have a consistent experience and a consistent understanding of that kind of persona. Not an exact science, but I'm curious about how you approach kind of validating or measuring whether what you've done is in line with what you would expect it to be.
There are, of course, some numbers that you can easily use, like how many people ended the skill in the middle of it, how many people did come to an end of the skill. There is classical research on comments, on what do people say about it. So there's a variety of things that you can do, as you would do with any other product. And in the end, that one use case, you could see it as a product as well, a product that you try to sell to people, that you try to have most attractive as possible to people and users. And so you have the analytics from Amazon or Google, or your own analytics that you implemented at the beginning when you decided that you want to build up your own custom environment. I think this is it's a mix out of data-driven, where you can already see a few of those patterns and behaviors of users within the skill, but also a lot of feedback and comments, be it passive comments, passive feedback and research, or just go to the user and say like, hey, how did you like it? What would you do different? It's one of my most favorite questions. If you would be God in this skill, what would you change immediately? And you can find patterns so quickly in that.
Is there anything specific that you do to measure or to validate the charisma element of it, whether or not it is charismatic?
How would you do that? I mean, in the end, I think a product is good when people use it. And I think if we did everything at the beginning, as we said before, and we build a charismatic thing, and it works, and people use it again and again and again, and they don't skip in the middle and they don't end it in the middle, I would say that's a very good thing to say this thing is charismatic.
Yeah, like for me it would be, but that fits to what Ray says. For example, a service hotline, if you call it, and then you see like the users who still want to talk to an agent afterwards, or if they are satisfied with all the info and how the voice assistant explains the info, and how when it can convey all the competence an agent would, and the customer doesn't want to be handed over to an agent. I think this would be something we could measure.
And do they come back? I mean, like, do they come back and still want to speak only to the assistant? And it's very number driven, I think. That proves us right in the end. Yeah,
I suppose the if I was playing devil's advocate, and this gets into one of Richard's questions, but I think this is a timely point to say or to mention it, is that what I'd be curious about is, because just for the record, I agree that creating a persona is worth doing. I think that creating that style guide is worth doing, even if it's just for the team, so that they all understand collectively how this thing should work and should talk. I'm an audiophile deep down, and so I care passionately about making something sound good to the ear, making it sound like a conversation. And I also care about making sure that when I test something with a user, it's giving them those kind of feelings that you would expect it to give them. Did it but I think that is slightly separate to what you were saying there around, did it get people were they able to do what they wanted to do? And I think that's where, because it may be that they could do it without all of that time and effort into persona design and crafting and stuff like that, which is one of Richard's questions, which is around. He said on the comment to the video I put on promoting this episode. Much of the research I give credence to almost always shows that users rank a bot having a strong personality, low on what they want out of it, well behind it understanding them, or giving straightforward responses. I don't have any deep feelings either way. I can understand where it's coming from. Is it more important to just get people to get the job done, or is it more important to get the job done in a nice way that has a chance of building a relationship? What is your response if, for example, that was a client saying to you, people just care about getting the job done, and the persona and charisma, they're not really feeling it? What's your kind of your sell to them as why you should do it?
Yeah. For me, like getting the job done means that the user in the end is like really sure about everything the voice bot said. So, for example, if you have a service case that you're confident as a user that this was the information and it's truthful and everything, and then it's fine, and the conversation had a really good end. So, and this is, I think, still a matter of trust, and this can be conveyed by a charismatic voice assistant.
Yeah.
What's your response, Ray? What do you think?
I'm a little. It's always in UX design and product design. You always try and get all the things involved and still try to make the best out of it. So I think. If there's a client who says, I just want to have the job done, it doesn't really end there just because they say you want to have the job done. In the end, you will still have a persona within that skill, because you will still decide on how to say it and how to phrase it. And even if the client doesn't really realize it, by giving comments and saying like, yeah, you know what, I think our brand doesn't say it this way. Maybe find it in a different way, and you go into that iteration of stuff, and that's where you already start, like very subtle on the side, start doing a persona. And maybe you could argue a persona is really not necessary at the beginning. And if you go on for just one single use case and you plan on never doing anything again for that brand, and that brand says like, we just want to have our assistant say, hi, I'm the brand, I love this, I don't like that, what can I do for you? Oh yes, I can send you an email, bye. Then shall be it. I mean, if that's how a brand wants to represent themselves, and if you as a designer say, okay, I need the money, I need to do this, let's do it, do it. I mean, don't say no just because of that. But in the end, if you're doing a long run, and if you know it's going to be a multi-purpose and with different kind of intents and different kinds of goals and use cases, then there will be a persona anyways. And I think if you didn't do that at the beginning, you will run into problems in the end, because then you will have all that conversation with your clients and telling them like, I have to say it that way because otherwise it wouldn't feel the same like in that skill, and then they don't come back because they don't realize it's the same brand and all these things, and they happen. People jump off of a skill because they think or fear that it's not the brand they wanted to talk to. Just again, IKEA. Just imagine the IKEA bot would talk into like the pizza guy from back when would talk to you. You call up the IKEA bot and it says, hi, I'm a Mayo. You would hang up directly, and that's very important for the whole conversation. And if I don't feel picked up by somebody in a conversation at the very beginning, then I don't like talking to that person. So why would I talk to your brand?
Mm-hmm. There's a lot more deeper stuff going on, isn't there? As soon as you put a voice in front of someone, you know, it's like that's why voice assistants got a bad rap in the very, very early days, is because they weren't quite capable of answering everything, but you expect it to because it's talking to you. If I ask you a question, even if you don't know the answer, you'll at least be able to kind of talk around a subject or whatever. But voice assistants, I'm sorry, I can't understand that, and people just attribute their own expectations of what a conversation is, and they shift that mental model onto whatever it is that's speaking back at them. I love the book Wired for Speech, and if people haven't read it, I would definitely recommend you get it, by Clifford Nass and Scott Brave. And one of the things again in there around the psychology of it is that a voice that you hear can do all kinds of stuff for you. You can hear a voice and build trust in that person without ever meeting them before, without ever seeing what they look like. You can build trust. And I think that some of that actually is trust that has been established by Google and Amazon, and to some extent Apple, because you're hearing robotic synthesized voices talking to you all the time. And so in a skill, for example, I think there is an argument for some Alexa skills to not bother with a persona if it means that you're piggybacking, in that instance, you're piggybacking off the back of Alexa's persona. So you're not designing your own persona, but you have to be consistent with Alexa's persona because you need to make the experience worthwhile. And so I wonder whether there's a little bit of this going on whereby if you call a call center or speak to a skill, or you enable a voice assistant on an app, if what the voice comes back to you sounds fairly similar to Google Assistant, fairly similar to Alexa, fairly similar to Siri, what I don't think we've spoken about and no one's spoken about yet is that actually that interaction is piggybacking off the back of the trust that Apple, Siri, and Amazon have spent the last 5 years establishing with you. And so, so whether you realize it or not, there is a degree of whether you want to call it charisma or not, I don't know, but it's trust in those. It's trust, isn't it, basically?
Yeah,
It is.
but I think it can be quickly destroyed if there's not the intelligence behind it. If you use a voice which is kind of similar, but then you don't understand anything, and there's also the point of to be consistent with that.
It's not only the voice; it's the words too. I mean, Google and Alexa and Siri can only give you the voice that has some trust already. But if you start writing lines that are like so out of line, then even that trusted voices can't help you get through that skill. It will not make it. So you have to have the right fitting words, and that's the basics of persona design already. I mean, there is a part done for you already, but still the words have to fit, the conversation have to fit. It all still has to fit with that voices.
Yeah, I agree. Couldn't have said it better myself. Well, this has been absolutely fantastic. Really enjoyed the conversation. I'm still kind of, I suppose it's, I want to see, what I've been asking for a long time is for something to prove the value. Do you know, like I mentioned there, sometimes for Alexa, a persona is not needed. If you're just piggybacking off the back of it, if it's order an Uber, then it's more utilitarian. It's utility based. Doesn't just piggyback off the back of Alexa's persona. If you're Domino's, the example that we gave there was a decent. My experience, even though I couldn't do anything with it, the experience of interacting with it was pretty cool because it had a persona, it had a distinct personality. It must have been so distinct because that's the one I think of when I think of this kind of stuff. And I'm still talking about it now, and I still haven't used the skill in about 3 years. So it must have been doing its job. But I think there's a bit of a gap as far as, either research or whatever it might be to try and enthuse people to do this. Because I think that a lot more people don't do it than do, perhaps. And I think that it's an area that warrants more attention. So thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your expertise and your insights. It's really appreciated. Where can people learn more about yourselves or learn more about VUI Agency if they're so inclined?
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
That was my northern accent coming into full stream towards the end of the podcast there. Where can people find you both if they wanted to reach out, or where can they find more about VUI Agency?
Yeah, it's really simple because it's we.agency. So as we are called, this is also our URL.
Like this.
Yes. You will find all our lovely colleagues there. You find our email address there, so you can get in contact whenever you want to and whenever you have questions or just want to talk about some stuff. We're doing a lot of innovative things at the moment, trying to get all these things that we think a charismatic assistant needs. And we know that we hardly know nothing, even though we do, which means we're open to every input and every conversation that may come up. So happy to hear you all.
Cool. Wicked. Ray, Marie, this has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you everyone for joining us as well. If you're listening to this on Monday when the podcast comes out, then this Thursday we'll be speaking to Sam Danby of Boost AI, and we're going to be talking about integrating voice into the contact center. And we probably might get into some omni-channel conversational AI chat as well, because they do chat and voice. And so it's going to be interesting. We're going to be talking about enterprise voice assistants yet again, best practice. And what they do is, which is pretty nice, which we'll probably get into, is baselining. We've been talking about generating voices in TTS, but what we'll be talking about next week a little bit is baselining the performance of the speech recognition engines, the big ones, Google, Amazon, IBM, etc., and how important it is to choose the right speech recognition provider for your application. So do join us then. Until next time, thank you again, Ray. Thank you again, Marie. Thank you again, Marie, rather. And we'll see